listen, you'll have to take me out of commission, cause dissing me ain't gonna get it. My self-esteem is prolific, so when I say I ain't tripping, you know.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. We're going to talk about Collision from July the 8th, 2023. And today, I'm going to try not to be too offensive. I know this is probably going to be one of those questions where people are going to say, what in the world are you going to be offensive about? It was a solid show, good matches, nothing dumb happened, nothing over the top happened. Well, how are you going to offend anybody? Well, stay tuned, because I definitely got some questions. All right, definitely got some questions. But let's talk about this thing. Yeah. We start the show with CM Punk. CM Punk says that there is a 18-year story between him and Samoa Joe that needs to be detailed. And he's going to do so right now. So he goes ringside. He doesn't go in the middle of the ring. Instead, he goes outside of the ring, where he starts talking about the history of Samoa Joe. And it's not just about him and Samoa Joe. It's about Calgary. It's about these people. And it says that to some, it feels like it's the end of the tournament, but it's not. This is 18 years. He's had missing teeth because of Samoa Joe. He's got scars on his beautiful face because of Samoa Joe. And then he says, but it's not just about him and Joe. It's about Owen Hart. And that if it was not for Owen Hart, he would not be there. In fact, if it wasn't for Owen Hart, there would be a lot of people who wouldn't be there. And that he can't promise the victory, but he can promise that he's going to fight, he's going to bleed, and he's going to give everything for these fans and for Owen. And then we go into a vignette for CM Punk and Samoa Joe, which leads into the main event. Now, this is the part of the show where I'm going to basically try not to offend anybody. Here's my question. Owen Hart, before AEW came around and started doing this tournament, approximately how many wrestlers did you hear say they were inspired by Owen Hart? As far as I know, one. It was Kevin Owens, who named his son after Owen Hart and named himself after Owen Hart. So that was pretty much it. Where did this mythology that Owen Hart was somehow changing the business? I don't know where that came from. It seemingly just appeared out of thin air. That, a guy who was kind of did some stuff in Japan and was an upper mid-card guy in WWE, revolutionized the business, but nobody ever really thought about him that way until damn near 20 years after he was dead. I mean, look, the circumstances behind Owen Hart dying is absolutely tragic, and everybody's been dealing with that for a really long time. And so giving the fans a catharsis in terms of keeping his name alive with the story of the tournament and everything, and supposed to be honoring his contributions to wrestling. Okay, sure. The question is, what are those contributions? So I get it. Wherever they are, whoever decided, for starters, let's back off Owen for a second. Whoever decided they should spend a fortnight in Canada needs to have their balls kicked into their throat. Get out of Canada. I don't know where they are in Canada, but they have been in Canada the whole month of June and part of July. It just seems like they're staying in Canada. I can't stand it. Get out of Canada, please. Anyway, back to Owen. The idea that, and I guess that's the babyface part of this, of the promo, is this: it's not just about Samoa Joe and Punk. It's about honoring Owen Hart, which is what the point of the tournament. But outside of him dying in an incredibly tragic way, and the feud between his wife and WWE, which led to, the lawsuits and all this kind of stuff, and him not being able to be in video games or going to the Hall of Fame or anything like that. This is the next best thing that wrestling fans can do to sort of honor Owen Hart, is to create this mythology around him and basically say, oh, there's so many wrestlers who wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Owen Hart. I'm like, okay, who? CM Punk, like, if it wasn't for Owen Hart, I wouldn't be here. It's like, okay, why is your trunks not patterned after Owen Hart, but patterned after Bret Hart? Why were you using Bret Hart spots in your matches and not Owen Hart spots? Well, I don't see you busting out a spinning wheel kick or over the head belly to belly suplex or a flying drop kick or anything of that nature. I don't see you doing any of Owen's stuff. Where does this idea all of a sudden that, Owen was like this guy that was up on the mountain and everybody was trying to touch that mountain and trying to get touch just the hem of his garment. Like, where did that come from? It seemingly was born by the AEW fan base, specifically for times when this tournament is occurring. And look, I don't have a problem with it. I just feel like we probably should ask that question, shouldn't we, at some point? Look, when you put Owen Hart in the stature of wrestlers who passed away, especially wrestlers who passed away while they were still active, there were wrestlers who were, I'll give you a good example, Eddie Guerrero. A lot of people come out of the box, how Eddie Guerrero was one of their favorite wrestlers. There's literal, I guess you could say, evidence of that. Eddie was a big draw. He saw merchandise. He was a world champion. You saw people almost immediately after Eddie died start doing his stuff. From the Three Amigos to the Mamacita to all this kind of stuff. They're recreating storylines with him in it. Now Eddie's death was tragic, but it was self-inflicted wounds. Let's be honest. He spent his life doing drugs and alcohol, and his body just gave up on him. Completely different scenario than Owen Hart. But I can understand why Eddie Guerrero would be a hero to so many people. He was the big Latin star, at a time where they didn't have any. And especially at a time where WWE wasn't pushing any. And WCW was out of business, and they weren't pushing any when they had any. And ECW didn't exist anymore. And none of the other wrestling promotions were taking like Latinos in wrestling seriously. So it makes sense to me that you would see a lot of wrestlers just basically adopt Eddie Guerrero as a cultural icon, if not anything else. Even if you feel like Eddie Guerrero is a B+ player, which, some people want to put that out there. He was a cultural icon, especially for people who were fans of SmackDown at that time. I could see why Eddie Guerrero would be on a pedestal. I see why. Owen Hart, I'm not seeing it. I don't see it. I don't see where Owen spent the bulk of his career, 99% of his career, in Bret's shadow. And now it's almost as if people are saying like, oh yeah, Owen was the real talent the whole time. And I'm just sitting here looking like, huh? Look, I love Owen Hart. Thought Owen Hart was great. But I just don't understand where all of this came from. It was the same thing with Brody Lee. Like when Brody Lee died, it was a completely tragic and unfortunate situation. And then everybody starts coming out of the woodwork talking about Brody Lee. And I'm just kind of like, I don't get it. I see, like, you might think he was a great guy. He seemed like a very nice man. Absolutely. Can't shit on him as a person. But as a wrestler, he was a mid-card guy. Never the top guy anywhere. Like, why all of a sudden we're naming our finishing moves after him and we're naming our kids after him? I'm like, what is going on here? Why can't we keep this stuff? It's almost like what Jadakiss said about, dead rappers getting better promotions. Like, that apparently applies to wrestlers too. And it's been applying to wrestlers for a long time. Like, another one is Chris Kanyon. I've been one of the few people who was like, have been getting a lot of heat because I'm like, who the hell cares about Kanyon? Like, I lived through the Monday Night Wars, and I was around, I guess, during the invasion angle. I don't remember anybody losing their shit over Kanyon. Nobody cared about Kanyon until he died. And then all of a sudden, all that stuff about him being gay came out. And then that became the reason why everybody latched onto him, is because he was gay. And then they weren't sure whether he was gay for real or if it was gay, if it was a gimmick. But everybody who's all of a sudden, I was a big fan of Kanyon. He was my best friend. I'm like, what? Really? Look, everybody is somebody's friend, for Christ's sake. I'm not going to say that nobody liked the guy. What I'm saying is, in the wrestling space, you start taking up a lot of space and a lot of air when you start talking about some of these dead wrestlers. And especially if you didn't live through the era, You got people who come out, behind. Guy was born in like 95 or something like that. It's like, no, brother. When he was Mortis, nobody cared. When he took the mask off and everything and he became Chris Kanyon, nobody cared. I think I was telling somebody recently, it was on Twitter. It was probably like a year or two ago, right around the time the Dark Side of the Ring came out. And they were talking about how one of their favorite matches is Chris Kanyon versus Perry Saturn from like Great American Bash or something like that. And I had just recently watched that pay-per-view. And guess what? From an in-ring perspective, the match was fine. They were doing very inventive things. The crowd, however, didn't care at all. Didn't move throughout the entire scenario. And I just watched that pay-per-view again recently within the last couple of days. And the crowd didn't really have anything, didn't care about what was going on at that particular point in time until Raven came out there and confronted Saturn. Because the story was about Saturn, Raven, and Kanyon. That was the story. And Raven gave Saturn the job to beating Kanyon, and he failed. So it wasn't until Raven confronted Saturn about losing that the crowd actually started waking up. All the flippity doodahs and inventive moves that they broke out during that match, nobody gave a shit. So I'm sitting here saying to myself, like, look, I know wrestling is 100%, it's an artistic endeavor. Everybody has their opinion. But there are some opinions that are not valid, right? The idea that Kanyon versus Saturn is one of your favorite matches, I just don't take that seriously as an opinion. You saying that Owen Hart inspired you, unless you knew him or something like that, I really just kind of shrug at that. It's not like Owen Hart was breaking barriers or, given a ton of credit. He wasn't like a Tiger Mask or anything like that. When it comes to junior heavyweight wrestlers, he was up there with the rest of them, of course, but there's a lot of guys were junior heavyweight wrestlers at the time and ended up being stars later on. Some of them didn't become as big of stars as they probably should have, like the great Sasuke, or somebody like the Ultimo Dragon. Those guys became stars in America and Jushin Thunder Liger and stuff. But it wasn't like Owen was doing anything different. Not really. A lot of the stuff that he was doing in Calgary was a step down from what Dynamite Kid had been doing before he even got there. And that's the thing that kind of blows my mind, because it's like, okay, I love Owen, but a lot of the stuff that he was doing, Dynamite Kid had already done, especially in the territory that he was raised in. Owen grew up in Calgary. The Dynamite Kid had already conquered Calgary. He had already brought like the flying headbutts and the super technical wrestling style, the speed and all that. He had already done that. He had done that years before Owen even got into business. Him and Brett was doing it. So it's like, what did Owen really do? What did he do? And I feel like some people might be offended, like me talking about Chris Kanyon and Owen Hart like this. And it's like, I'm not saying that nobody should care about them. That's not my point. My point here is that we're building a mythology around these guys that might be a little bit questionable, that's outsized in comparison to what they was actually doing in the business. And it happens a lot. And again, I use the Jadakiss line because it happens in rap too. All of a sudden, everybody who got killed stacked bundles and Big L or whatever. Oh, he was just about to blow up. He was just about to be the man. Yada, yada. He was so nice. Yeah, sure. Whatever you say. But just putting that out. Just a topic of conversation. You guys argue amongst yourselves. And feel free to tell me I'm wrong or I'm a hater or whatever. Thumbs up. Do your thing. Speaking along the same lines of and I promise I'll get back to Collision in a minute. I want to address this thing too because I saw it. And since I'm already talking about how subjective people's opinions are, Brian last tweeted out that Kevin Kelly is the best lead announcer or the best announcer in pro wrestling. And that ruffles some feathers. There are some people who are stalwarts for Michael Cole or Taz got offended and saying like you have to be specific. Is it play by play or color or whatever? And I don't think it matters. Look, to me, Kevin Kelly is boring. Boring commentary is dry. It doesn't add anything to the show. You're just kind of there. It's like we want to have commentary because somebody has to be able to talk over the matches, I guess. Then Kevin Kelly's your guy. If you're actually trying to add something to the show, then maybe not. Maybe not Kevin Kelly. But Brian Last is one of these guys who he could probably pop in a tape of Idaho professional wrestling from 1946 or some shit like that. He knows everybody. And the dry radio style of announcing would be right up his alley. And I look at it and say, it's fine for the time. Like if I'm watching an old Bruno Sammartino match or Stan Hansen or something like that, I'm not going to expect the kind of commentary that we should be getting today. But on a modern product, Kevin Kelly's commentary is boring. All right. It is literally sleep inducing. And if it doesn't matter who does commentary, because all you want to do is be knowledgeable about the product and be knowledgeable about the performers, which is, the basics of doing commentary, along with having a solid voice, But there's nothing special about Kevin Kelly at all whatsoever. I guess he could be the best simply by not being as annoying as somebody like Michael Cole is absolutely annoying. Or is he less annoying now that Vince isn't there? Sure. But he's still annoying as hell. That Kevin Patrick, he's the worst. He's awful. He's the drizzling shiz. All right. My guy, Vic Joseph, I like Vic Joseph. Personally, that would be my choice. But Vic Joseph is in the WWE system. He uses the same language as Michael Cole. Michael Cole is his boss. Excalibur is excruciating. The auctioneering style of Excalibur with the rise and tones, and Tony Schiavone is completely useless. And we can just go through up and down through that. But when you listen to wrestling commentary, a lot of wrestling commentary tries to add some excitement to the product. Listen to AAA. I mean, they're yelling through the entire show. It's like listening to Spanish soccer or something like that. They're yelling throughout the entire thing. We know that Michael Cole is, yelling throughout the entire show. They're damn near a performer as well, and to some degree, you can say that the commentators are not performers. They are there to boost the story, to get the fan who is watching to understand what's going on. At the same time, though, if you're already an educated fan, then this style of commentary is dry. I'm talking bone dry. Especially since the matches are so long on Collision. Jesus Christ, Kevin Kelly is the best you can say is the guy is inoffensive, But anybody who wants to argue about whether so-and-so is the best wrestling announcer, to me, it doesn't make much sense. Most wrestling commentary don't add anything anyway. Most of it is a distraction. It got to a point where Michael Cole was so bad at some points where I would just watch the shows on mute. Like, bullshit you not. Unless there was a promo segment in the ring, I watch the show on mute. WWE announcers don't call moves unless it's a finisher or something like that. So they don't have to worry about what the move is going to be called. And plus, wrestlers aren't going to do super complicated moves anyway. 9 times out of 10, you're already going to know what it is yourself. Let alone, and that's really what the announcers are all about, But even when you look at somebody like Joey Styles didn't just call moves. He had his own style. He added excitement to the ECW product. He was knowledgeable about the storylines. He had good inflection. He had good diction. He had good timing. He had good comedic skills. He was a one-man commentary booth. So it's not just like, oh, you want everybody to be like Jim Ross. I wish one person on commentary could be as decent as Joey Styles. And Joey Styles is an elite announcer as far as I'm concerned, especially if he had to do it all by himself. adding color to the show isn't just the job of the color commentator. The color commentator helps with the technical part, which, is the part that the announcer, the voice, doesn't have. Like Jim Ross never wrestled, so you got Jerry King Lawler there to tell the story of what this wrist lock will do to you. That's the job of the color guy. They still got it in MMA too. It's the play-by-play dude, who I guess in the old days of UFC was Mike Goldberg, and then there was the color guy who was Joe Rogan, who would talk about what this omoplata might do to your arm or your whatever. So for me, Kevin Kelly adds almost nothing to this product. He knows the stories, he knows the performers, he can drop factoids, but that's about it. Even when it comes to getting over a talent, I don't think Kevin Kelly can get anybody over. Mike Tenay during the time of TNA, like those guys were good for that product. They were very exciting for that product. They added to that product. Don West, even though sometimes he was getting a little too excited, he added to that product, and I think sometimes people get to the idea of commentators are supposed to call it like it's football, but if you're going to call it like it's football, you should call it like it's like Monday Night Football and not local football where nobody else outside of this region is going to see it, and that's what Kevin Kelly feels like to me. He's perfect for Ring of Honor or something like that, where it's a small niche product where they don't really, you could strip down a lot of the stuff, but if it's a big production like Collision is supposed to be, he comes across as being too small and too dry for this product. And again, in New Japan, he's perfectly fine because it's a stripped down product, no pomp, no circumstance. It wants to be a sports-like atmosphere. Ring of Honor, similar. But Collision is supposed to be like this. It is a little bit more up than the regular dry sport, Like if you wanted to really give it a Ring of Honor feel, you wouldn't have so many lights. The buildings wouldn't be as big. You wouldn't have the giant trons and all this kind of stuff, So they need somebody that could, like if they had like a Mauro Ranallo or something like that, he might be a little much. Mauro could be a bit much. But that would be somebody who actually adds something to the show. Add some entertainment value to the show, because commentary is part of the show. I know that, not supposed to be, but he is. He's part of the show. All right. I spent almost 20 minutes talking about dead wrestlers and commentary. So let's talk about, this show finally. CM Punk versus Samoa Joe was the main event of this show. And since I talked about CM Punk's promo earlier, let's talk about that match now. I enjoyed the match. I thought the match was good. Joe, Punk, they didn't try to do anything that they couldn't do. They took age into account. They hit each other pretty hard. They trust one another. But they didn't go overboard. Nobody looked bad. They both were kind of slow, but that was to be expected. Joe don't want to blow up. He did chop CM Punk so hard one time that he fell down. And I mean by Joe fell down. But other than that, there was nothing else that was kind of ridiculous or hilarious that occurred. It was a straight up singles match. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Joe even got in his spot where Punk tried to do a crossbody and Joe just walked away from it. So I think it was a very solid match. Now I do have a critique, however. My critique is that, and I like the finish too. Joe tries to do the coquina clutch. Punk counters it into a sort of a victory roll and wins via pinfall. And Joe is shocked. And Punk is like, yeah, I finally beat him. But that's my issue. If you were going to tell this story of 18 years of not being able to beat this guy, like this guy is the one mountain you cannot climb, wouldn't it make sense for there to be bigger stakes and a bigger audience for something like that? Like, to me, they squashed this story and it wasn't necessary. To me, it felt like Joe should have won. just to continue the slide. Whereas like in Ring of Honor, he couldn't beat him. In AEW, he can't beat him. And then maybe later on down the line, when Punk is the champion of the world again, Samoa Joe comes out of nowhere and says, I'm the one guy you can't beat. You know? And I haven't been able to get a title shot around here, you know, a world title match with anybody. But I know you're going to give it to me because I got something that you want, which is an undefeated streak over you. You know, and you build that to a pay-per-view show. And you show that Joe is a guy who's in Punk's head, who's got Punk's number, and is Punk going to lose the world title to Samoa Joe? And then you have him beat Samoa Joe, and it's like, okay, you got that monkey off his back. But now he beat him on a regular episode of Collision, and in the middle of a tournament, not even the finals of the tournament, but like a middle of the tournament, you just kind of have to look and be like, okay, we went hard on that story, and then we got rid of it. It's over. And we have to question, like, okay, now they're 3-1 when they could have been 4-0, and that could really piss Punk off that he still is losing to Samoa Joe, even, you know, over a decade later, after all his experiences, after all the people he's fought. And think about how many promos you could have cut, where Punk could have said, man, I've been in the ring with Undertaker, Cena, Michaels. I've been in the ring with Hangman. I've been in the ring with this guy, and I managed to find a way to beat all of them at least once. But Samoa Joe is the one guy I have not been able to beat. How is it that I've matured? I'm better than I used to be. I'm smarter than I used to be, and I still can't beat Samoa Joe? You know, why is that? And that could have been a really good hook for a big match later. But they blew it. You know? And I don't want to say the match was nothing, because it technically doesn't. It's not nothing. There was something on the line here. But this was small stakes compared to what you could do. And especially if you have any inkling that you might want to work a program between Punk and Joe, which is, I think this audience would have been ready for that and receptive to it. So if you had an audience that was receptive to a CM Punk Samoa Joe feud, you know, in modern day, not just a match, but a feud, then you could have gotten a lot of more juice out of this thing. And probably really made some money out of it by having Joe win and mock Punk over it. And then Punk could just, you know, cut these quiet promos about how he's, you know, here's the last time he wrestled Samoa Joe. I don't know, what was it? 2004 or 5 or something like that. You know, he could say I was immature. I was a stupid kid. I knew a lot about the business. I was world champion. But, you know, since then, I've done this and this and this and this and this and this. And I thought I had blown past the Samoa Joes. You know, I did more in that other company than Samoa Joe ever did. You know, I did more here than Samoa Joe ever did. I should be able to beat Samoa Joe. And I can't. What is it about him? And then maybe you have him obsess over, like he's watching, like you have the video library and everything. Like, just imagine if you did like promos of Punk sitting there with those dark eyes watching tape of him wrestling Samoa Joe, rewinding it and watching spots where he may be messed up or, you know, overanalyzing everything that he's doing. He really just focuses on that. Like, he's obsessing over beating Samoa Joe. And you really could have told a really good story about that. And it could have been something that would have been worth CM Punk coming back for, because he's already won the championship. He's already been world champion. He's already feuded with MJF. He's already feuded with, you know, well, he hasn't feuded with the Elite yet, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But he's done a lot of things on this show already. This is something that would have been fresh, that you could have sunk your teeth into and made something of. And that, just off the top of my head, I came up with some of this stuff. If that kind of thing fell in my lap and I owned the library oh my God. In terms of storytelling, look at all the stuff you could have done. And it wouldn't have taken you forever to do. You could have just said, go match by match. Match one, Punk is sitting there watching the first match, breaking it down. What was his mind state at the time? You know, what mistakes do he feel like he made in that match that he didn't make in the second? And then he watches the second match the next week. He breaks that match down, thinks about the mistakes that he made in the second match that he didn't make in the third. And then we get to the match at Collision where he loses that match too. And, you know, now he's kind of down on himself. He's like, look, I'm smarter than I used to be. I'm not as fast, but I'm tougher. You know, I got more grit. I got more character. I got more scars in me. You know, I know what I'm made of at this point. You know, I know what Joe's made of. I know what Joe can do. Joe is more limited than he used to be. You know, we're 15, 20 years older than we were at the time. You know, there could have been so much there. And I feel like he dropped the ball. But ultimately, it's Tony Khan's money. So, whatever. Anyway, after the match, Punk offers Joe a handshake. Joe takes it. Then snatches a chokehold on Joe. Pretty pedestrian finish. Because Joe did this to Roderick Strong last week. Which makes the handshake very strange. Because, you know, Punk was decimated by the idea of Joe, you know, putting him in the coquina clutch last week and seeing him carry Roderick Strong off on a stretcher, you know, for Punk to be like, oh, I'll shake your hand. He should have been trying to get the hell out of there because he should have known, like, 20 years, you know Samoa Joe, right? You know this guy. He's not going to take losing laying down. You should know that. So Joe goes outside and gets a chair, and then he's chased off by FTR, and that's the end of the show. Okay. They did their best. You know, they did their best. All right, for the rest of the show is concerned, the Owen Hart tournament continues. Powerhouse Hobbs versus Ricky Starks. Ricky Starks wins this match. It was a good match. Really, it was I wouldn't say really good, but it was a good match. Similar to Punk and Joe, this match was a feud, but these two guys were 1-1 already. I don't like this. Again, AEW drops the ball so much on storytelling. These guys almost no build for their match. It's a big grudge match in the middle of the tournament, but they didn't build anything for it. They showed clips in a small box in the left-hand side. So if you didn't know, they used to be tag team partners and they was in Team Taz and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, Hobbs betrayed Starks, then I guess you learned it from that little box. They didn't give it a lot of time. And it's one thing that AEW has got to fix is they have got to start investing time in these matches. Not just having the match be long, but invest time before the match to get people more excited for the match. For Christ's sake. I mean, that's wrestling 1-on-1. You know, it's literally wrestling 1-on-1. You can't just have a match. You have to have a reason for the match to exist. And then once you have a reason for the match to exist, now you build to the match. You know, now you tell the story of the match. Tell the story of the performers, where they come from, what they've been doing so far. You know, all this kind of stuff. And they whiffed it. They missed the ball. Anyway, QT Marshall, he was in this match and getting, Jesus Christ, he was distracting Powerhouse Hobbs. And because he distracted Powerhouse Hobbs got tackled by Ricky Starks. You know, yes, Ricky Starks, who is all of 5'7", he tackled 6'2" wall of muscle with Powerhouse Hobbs and pinned him with a tackle. Come on. At least come up with a better finish than that. Something about AEW with these small guys, man. Anyway, Ricky Starks winning was probably the right decision anyway. I probably would have preferred Hobbs to go over so that Hobbs can get a rematch with Punk. Again, that's a storyline they could have had too. Now, I don't think Punk has wrestled Ricky Starks before, so this is their first time ever. So that's fine. But I think building to Hobbs wanting to get a rematch with Punk would have been fun too. So Starks wins. He disappears. QT is in the ring apologizing to Hobbs. and Hobbs shoves him, and you think, okay, finally we're about to kill this guy and get rid of QT Marshall. Hopefully he gets spread across the earth like Osiris, where, you know, not Osiris, Osiris. I was right. His arms and legs are just dumped in different places, and, you know, somebody has to put him back together again, like the Mummy or something. But alas, we don't. Some J Brown took a bump for him. I think it was Aaron Solo. He got in the way, and Hobbs beat him up, and Hobbs just left QT and Harley Cameron behind without doing anything to them. I am deeply, deeply perturbed by Powerhouse Hobbs and his booking. It is incredibly bad. Anything that QT Marshall touches has turned to shit. It has turned to absolute shisa. It's no good. QT Marshall, useless. He is adipose tissue in pro wrestling. He's cellulite. All right? Burn him. Burn him off. Get rid of him. Miro cuts a promo saying he found himself after his issues with God, and he cannot be tempted from his path of righteousness, not by God, not by his double-jointed wife, not by a big shiny belt. He's ready to hurt others in ways that he cannot be hurt, and that there is a big battle coming, and it's the one you've all been waiting for. And I don't know what that means. But he cut another atheistic promo where apparently he doesn't care about anything. He doesn't care about his wife. He doesn't care about championships. He doesn't care about God. I don't know. So what is he fighting for then? You know, if you're not fighting for money, for honor, or for love, what are you fighting for? Maybe you should put one of those things back in and fight for something that matters, that might be relatable to the average Joe. But I like Miro, and I like this Redeemer character. I don't even know if you want to call it Redeemer anymore, because it's not really the Redeemer anymore, right? Like, what is he going to be redeemed by? He's redeemed by God. If he doesn't believe in God anymore, or he's angry with God, or I think he called God a coward or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, they did it backstage with Athena and Willow. Willow got injured in Japan, so she won't be able to wrestle tonight. They pushed her match with Athena back to Rampage. So Athena comes out and complains that Willow ruined her big Collision debut, and then questioned whether her injury was even legit. So Willow says, oh yeah, I still want this match to happen. I'm going to put my smile back on, and I'll see you Friday. And then she says she's going to beat Athena, and then afterwards she wants a title match for the Ring of Honor Women's title, which apparently still exists. It's still a thing. Athena says that she doesn't believe she'll be medically cleared, doesn't believe that Willow will be medically cleared, but if she does, then she'll see her there. And so there's no way that Willow wins, but if by some miracle she does win, she will consider giving her a title match. I don't see why Athena would even entertain the title match idea, but whatever. So poor Willow got injured, jerking a curtain in Japan. It is what it is. She's also has lost that strong title. So they took it from her already. She was champion about a month, but she wasn't supposed to be the champion anyway. So I guess that run was as good as it was going to get. Too bad. Athena did a sort of in-character promo where with Grapsody, the Fightful podcast, where she talked about there being people who don't want her on the show. But I think that was in character. I don't think that it's about her personally. That certain people don't want her on Dynamite or whatever. I think that she's just playing off of all of the heat that's been going on. I don't think it's legit. So that's why I didn't talk about it, if you want to know. If it turns out that it's something that's deeper than that, then I'll definitely discuss it. But for now, it sounds like she was in character, and so I don't care about that. Second match on the show, Julia Hart defeats somebody named Bambi Hall, who was literally twice Julia Hart's size. She wins by submission, Julia Hart did. And I wrote down that at least Julia attacked the legs. You know, at least she did a decently psychological match. And she was aggressive, which is a positive. Julia Hart she's coming along. I mean, she's a kid, you know. I have to put her in the same box as the NXT talents, where she's doing what she can do, which is, you know, very limited stuff. She's not being pushed beyond her skill level, which I think sometimes is an issue in NXT, where they try to get people to do more than they are ready for at that time. Where you could tell that Julia Hart is only doing as much as she knows how to do right now. They don't have her in long matches. They don't have her in any feuds. She comes out, she wrestles, she wins, usually, or loses, whatever, and then they call it a day. Anytime she has to have a long match, though, somebody probably gets hurt, or it looks like shit, or she almost dies. So this was a simple situation where she came in there, she did a little, and then she got out of there. Good. Malachi Black had a promo, however, and his promo was addressing the Andrade mask situation. My mask. Anyway, Malachi says that Andrade did not become who he is until he took his mask off. Meanwhile, Malachi himself has to hide by wearing a mask. He says that Andrade allows the mask to control who he is, and like a child with a blanket, he can't let the mask go. And that Andrade doesn't know how great he can truly be until he does let that mask go. And then he threatened them. I think they're going to have a match next week or something like that, where he's going to prove to Andrade how good Andrade is without his mask. So this gave us Andrade as an opportunity to respond. And what were the first words that came out of Andrade's mouth? Look at me. Oh, bruh, I almost broke into sweats. Look at me. Look at me. I almost died. My God. Oh, I love it. Look at me. Anyway, he says he is a businessman, and he doesn't hide behind his mask, but his mask represents his heritage, his family, his Latin American people. And when his mask is on, it's all about business. When the mask is off, it's time to fight. It's time to win. Andrade cut a promo. He spoke very slowly and very deliberately, which actually helps with his English. The promo still kind of struggled a little bit because English is clearly not his first language. Clearly, and he's been working on it, and you can tell he's been working on it. But for Christ's sake, it ain't there yet. But I like the idea because, you know, for luchadors, it's pretty basic. The mask is about more than just wrestling. It's part of your identity. It's who you are. You know, it's why guys cry when they lose their mask, because usually that's who they have been their entire lives. And for Malachi Black to make the argument that, you know, it's a security blanket for Andrade, I like that. I think it's a good heel dynamic, saying, like, you don't need this. Well, Andrade is saying, like, what do you mean I don't need this? It represents everything about me. And it's, you know, Malachi Black telling him to shed his past, to stop caring about his family. I mean, the House of Black is a cult, right? So it's typical cult behavior to say that you should cut everything from the past out and, you know, believe in yourself or believe in them. So this was a very sensible feud. And it could be silly about, you took me mask. You took him, give me my mask back. Return my mask. Look at me. But it's not just about that. You know, it's actually deeper. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. The match everybody has been talking about this evening has been Bullet Club Gold versus FTR. Apparently, the stipulation was that if Bullet Club Gold won, they would get a tag team championship match. But if FTR won, then Bullet Club Gold cannot challenge for the tag team titles as long as FTR was the champions. That second stipulation, I don't know where that came from. I'm not even going to hold you up. I don't know where that came from. Really good match here between these four guys. Like, even give Juice Robinson credit. You know, they did a decent to good match here. My problem, it was too damn long. That's it. That's really it. I did a really good job on the hot tag with FTR hair. Cash Wheeler. I'm about to call him Cash Harwood. My God. Anyway, they milked that hot tag for a long time. They didn't do simultaneous tags. They milked it. They really built it up. It's when they started hitting all the big moves, that's That's when I felt like the match was going a little long. Usually, after the hot tag, we're near the end, but not in modern tag team matches. Modern tag team matches, the hot tag is just something we do in terms of an obligatory match. But they broke out the Power and Glory finish, which legit rules. It was legit a really good finisher. And I know people didn't pay too much attention to Power and Glory, but the finisher was great. Hercules and Paul Roma, really good. I won't say they were a great tag team. They were only together for a short period of time, but that finisher rules. You know, the superplex, big splash, that was a great finish. Tells you a lot that a lot of tag teams during that time had really good finishers. You know, it might not be, you know, the Rock and Roll Express or the Legion of Doom or anything like that, but usually they had a cool finish. And it's nice to see younger tag teams, you know, keep that stuff alive. They blow it out of proportion and typically bury it in some way, like having people kick out of it. But at least, you know, it's a move that people see and, you know, they can do at least. Anyway, they did a spike power driver too, which, you know, it is what it is. Anyway, Juice Robinson ended up pinning Dax Harwood with like a front facing DDT. This match was a good 20 plus minutes, I think. I'm guessing it was more than 20 minutes. And Bullet Club Gold wins. Juice Robinson got the pin. Afterwards, they argued. Bullet Club Gold, of course, bragged about winning. Tag Team Championship match will be set for next week. And it's going to be 2 out of 3 falls. Okay. So this is legit solid, legit good. And I'm not even going to attack Juice Robinson this week. I'm going to let Juice Robinson live. I'm going to let him slide on this one. He did his part here. I will say this, though. Epic match. You know, these 20-minute bangers in the middle of the show. The problem that we have with this is that not only are these matches long, but if it's not the main event, you have to try to follow this. You know? So once you dump all of this stuff out into a match, the show has to continue. So there is 2 more matches after this, and you giving these people all this time in a non-title match. The match was non-title and it felt like it was going on forever. So imagine how long the championship match is going to be when it's 2 out of 3 falls. They might as well give them the first hour of the show. I don't know, but I am of the opinion that unless you're the main event, you probably don't need to, or a main event. Like if it's WrestleMania and you're part of a double or triple, quadruple, like, you know, main event or something like that, then sure. Like I guess you could say this was a double main event. I guess you could say. But in any event, this match was probably too long. I think this match was longer than the actual main event. Just make it the main event and don't follow it. You know, having to follow this is a pain in the ass. And it's a pain in the ass for the viewer because the viewer is tired. This is where you need to do something that breaks up the monotony. Because we've just watched wrestling straight. Don't just throw another match out there, which is exactly what they did. They just threw another match out there. Nobody got a reaction. Nobody cared about that match. It featured people who weren't over. So it wasn't going to get over anyway. But it's just a buffer match between this match and the next match. Like, okay, where's the levity? This is where you should put something to raise people up. You know, give people a break. Let them stretch their legs, get up, walk around, talk about how good that match was, and save these other folks the bumps because they're wasting their time trying to follow that match that you just had. You know, and it was the same thing when I was talking about on SmackDown. You have a 40-minute bloodline segment. Don't follow it with another long promo, which is essentially what they did. You know, but whatever. Still is a really good match. I'm not even going to chastise Juice Robinson this week, so he gets a pass. He gets a good match pass this week. Scorpio Sky versus Action Andrade. Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I did not want to watch this. I didn't care to see this, didn't want to watch it. What happened to Action Andrade? I thought he was the next big thing. What happened to this guy? You know, he fell off the face of the earth. People are already making fun of how he beat Chris Jericho, and then that was sort of it for him. Which, I mean, if you got a functional brain, you already knew that was going to be it. He wasn't going to go higher than that. Jericho kept yelling about how, this kid's going to be a star. He's going to be a star. And I'm like, really? You see that nobody's actually a star in AEW. Not really. Unless you were made a star somewhere else, Ring of Honor or something. AEW hasn't done a good job of making their own stars. Not really. All right, so that's the show. Apparently, Battle of the Belts will be next week, too. So we're looking forward. We're looking down the barrel of 3 hours of AEW next week. I don't know how you feel about that. I know how I feel about that. Especially considering they're putting the tag team championship match that they just built. They're putting it on Collision and not Battle of the Belts. So the Battle of the Belts brand, it exists for, I don't know the reasoning why it exists, but it does. And I'm going to see what they're going to put on that show. And something tells me that it might end up being Athena versus Willow, because Willow might beat Athena on Rampage. And then they end up doing a rematch on Battle of the Belt so they could put the Ring of Honor women's title on the line. So that's pretty much what I'm guessing. And I can guess that because of who's booking it, which is Tony Khan. And I don't think they're going to do anything of note. They've already booked the Ring of Honor world title at Death Before Dishonor, so it's going to be Claudio versus Mark Briscoe. So they're not going to put that title on the line. Maybe Chris Statlander will wrestle somebody, but it's going to be somebody she could easily beat. It's not going to be anybody that she can that's going to actually challenge her. They'd probably dump that TNT title on there too. Luchasaurus versus, I don't know. Who was that guy they was talking to? Shawn Spears? Yeah, it's going to be Luchasaurus versus Shawn Spears, Willow and Athena, and probably Chris Statlander versus whatever curtain jerker they can find in a corner somewhere. That show is not going to be worth watching. But I'm interested in what the card's going to be. I don't think I even watched the last Battle of the Belts show. I don't think I even watched it. So I'm questioning whether I should watch it again this time. But I guess it's going to... But next week is going to be the finals of the Owen Hart tournament, which ought to be fine. Samoa Joe is out. So Ricky Starks versus CM Punk. And it's going to be the winner of Ruby and Sky Blue versus the winner of Athena and Willow. So I'm guessing it's going to be probably Ruby versus Willow. And that should be fun. Ruby versus Willow. That should be fine. It makes sense because you already got a storyline attached. So that's my guess. But them downgrading the Owen Hart tournament to Collision. I know some people don't think it's a step down, but they were doing it on pay-per-view last year. And now they're not doing it on pay-per-view. So what do you call it? I don't know. I call it a step down. But for the most inspiring wrestler of the last 4 years, Owen Hart, they're gonna dump his tournament final on their B show, which is fine, I guess. But let me know what you guys think. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.